So, heat pumps. This is clearly going to be a bit of a speed dating affair. I've included a lot of slides with a lot of information. I don't intend to go through them all now, but what I wanted to provide is a load of material for you to be able to take away and digest at your leisure.
I've got to go back into the meeting, so very quick.
This is fundamentally where we've got to get back to. And for those of you in the southwest, I'm assuming that you'll recognise this image. The fact is, our forebears knew that all our energy comes from the sun. So, are you seeing these slides changing? So,
yes, we can be.
Yeah. Yeah, good. That's all right, because I've got some funny things going on my screen, so apologies. So we need to get back to this point where everything's coming to the sun, and the fact is, all renewable technologies are derived from solar energy. So it doesn't matter whether it's wind or obviously solar. It's all tidal power. It's all derived ultimately from the sun. So why is electrification so carbon efficient? Well, clearly we're decarbonising the electricity grid very rapidly. This graph is taken from the Treasury Green Book, and you can see that by 2030 we're getting really very low. The bottom two green lines are showing where heat pump technology will be sitting at that point. The line that goes up is actually gas CHP, and the reason why the carbon intensity of gas CHP is rising is because the electrical output is clearly reducing in value from a carbon perspective as the grid is decarbonised. And I just wanted to show this snapshot. This is taken from Carbon Watch on our website, and I wanted to show this because it shows how out of date SAP currently is, SAP and RDSAP in fact. So this is a snapshot of live data from yesterday evening. I'm sorry it's a bit blurry, but again, you'll get a better view when you're reviewing this at your leisure. The two yellow bars are the carbon intensity of heat pumps operating at either 400 or 320% efficiency. So very crudely, a ground source and an air source. So the vertical black line sitting way out on the right-hand side, that is currently the SAP carbon factor for grid electricity at 519. That's how bad SAP is at the moment. We've been asking for that figure to be changed since 2014, I believe. And then convert that into some real data for a typical sort of 6 kilowatt home, so a family home possibly. 6 kilowatt peak power demand, 10,800 kilowatt hours a year in energy requirement. And this table shows what the outcome is if you are displacing different types of fuel. The key here is that fundamentally they're all telling you that by putting in a heat pump at the moment, using figures from DEFRA for carbon factors for last year, every single house you do is effectively displacing the equivalent of one average vehicle off the road permanently. So apart from the improvement for the house, you're actually also making a significant difference to air quality and decarbonisation. There's also this piece about the heat efficiency hierarchy, and we are constantly trying to encourage local authorities and through them their housing providers to look at waste heat opportunities. Typically, the worst waste heat, of course, is the heat you've generated yourself and then throw away because of poor insulation. But there is waste heat everywhere, and there are wins to be had. And the waste heat is sometimes not on your site; it could be over the fence. So we're encouraging people to look for waste heat opportunities because those become fantastic resources for heat pumps, particularly obviously ground and water source. So it's very important that we look at what the waste heat hierarchy looks like across your turf. And it may be that the waste heat is in one building, but actually you've got a demand somewhere else. And this association between different types of building and target, I think, is also incredibly important, because whilst we're talking about housing today and retrofit of housing, there is absolutely true value to be had in looking at areas where you can combine larger, corporate buildings, so council headquarters, schools, hospitals, you name it, within networks for associated housing. I've left some slides here on heat pumps 101, which you can review at your leisure, just explaining how they work, what they might look like, what emitters we can use, and this will display some of the fallacies that say, you know, you have to have underfloor heating. Not true. You can use traditional cast iron radiators, you can use fan coils, you can use standard flat panel radiators, absolutely anything, provided the systems are designed properly. All housing types, so it doesn't matter whether it's blocks of apartments, it's rows of terraced houses, traditionally built terraced houses, and I've included the new development there because this does, I think, illustrate this concept of taking commercial buildings, so that's a school sitting there on the edge of a housing development, and saying, actually, can we combine those two in an intelligent way for maximum benefit? Incumbent fear and doubt. Now this now talks about the resistance that tenants and homeowners might have. And you see a lot of this in the press, particularly, I mean, there's been a report released recently by the EUA. You know, massive radiators, probably not, is the answer. I mean, I used to retrofit myself, period of property buildings, and I never once had to replace all the radiators, not once in 10 years. Replumb the whole house and underfloor heating, absolutely not necessary. Gardener disaster, yeah, potentially for ground source, but actually worth it, and you could drill to reduce that issue, and air source, of course, doesn't have that problem. And the question about disruption, I think, is really interesting. So I'm old enough to remember when my grandparents put central heating into their house for the first time. Boy, was that disruptive. Floorboards up, plaster off the walls, all the furniture had to be moved, curtains shortened. It was a disaster. 6 months later, if you said to them, don't you wish you were still bringing in the coal? They'd say, absolutely not. And this point about disruption, I think, is really, really important because we talk about cost of these measures. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, we went through the exercise of basically installing central heating pretty well across the country. And the cost was enormous. But did it bankrupt the country? I don't recall that it did. So we've been there before, and we did it for good reason. We've got good reason to do it again, and we should be doing it again. A couple of case studies which I've also included, which again you can review at leisure. So blocks of apartments, absolutely. These particular apartments in Enfield were treated with what we call shared ground loops, so boreholes, individual heat pumps in each individual property. Massive savings for tenants and carbon savings, of course. This one slightly different. So again, shared boreholes in the common areas, but individual properties. And here, quite neatly, the heat pump used is a wall-mounted device that looks like a boiler, which goes some way to dealing with consumer resistance. New build, this one again, central borehole system, but here it's also delivering cooling, which in new build is one of the growing classes of complaints for owners. It's also important to look at the impact in terms of where you put these things in the rural communities. We're particularly addressing MEES now with landlords, how they go about addressing MEES. And these are a couple of examples of zoning in villages where we've looked at different property densities, and have managed to come up with schemes that are either district schemes based around centralized plant, district schemes based around individual heat pumps in individual homes, and or air source, and a combination thereof.
1 minute left, Bean.
Tenants, homeowners are key. So here are some of the factors, and we do a lot of discussions at the moment with community groups, talking to them, trying to learn what it is that makes them that influences their decision. We need new funding mechanisms to make all these things affordable. And again, I'll let you digest these slides at your leisure. We need government policy that gives us some long-term vision of where we're heading. And the last item here, I think, is important. So we talked about understanding where your building's at, so you know where you go. EPCs do not tell you that really well at the moment. So we would consider central funding for really good assessment, building assessments, because that would be a really valuable asset to understand what we've got. Why should we take actions now? And again, you can look at that at your leisure. And I just sow the seed here. Look, homes without employment are not really homes at all. The fact that we can now make use of waste heat to create new employment opportunities could transform the lives of some of your tenants, even without treating the houses themselves. 360 full-time jobs created with this particular initiative here.